Today, I want to talk to you about something simple, yet absolutely life-changing. Your ability to force your brain to do hard things. Because let me tell you something with absolute certainty, your brain is not designed to make you successful. It's designed to keep you safe. Safe means comfortable. Safe means familiar. Safe means repeat what you already know. But comfort has never created greatness. Familiarity has never transformed a life. Playing small has never awakened the giant inside you. So if you want an extraordinary life, if you want success, fulfillment, power, and purpose, then you must learn one skill most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You must train your brain to obey you, not the other way around. The real battle ice in your mind. Every time you want to start something meaningful, wake up early, go to the gym, study, build a business, face a fear, your brain fires the same ancient signal. Stay back. Stay safe. Do it later, not now. What if you fail? That voice is not your enemy. That voice is simply outdated programming. But here's the truth you must accept today. Your life becomes powerful the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses. Because the hardest part isn't the gym. The hardest part isn't the business. The hardest part isn't the work. The hardest part is the first 5 seconds. The moment your brain tries to talk you out of it, and if you can win those 5 seconds, you can win your life. The difference between who you are and who you want to be. You're not lacking motivation. You're not lacking intelligence. You're not lacking talent. You're lacking one thing, a habit of doing the hard thing when your mind says no. Look at anyone you admire, top leaders, athletes, creators, entrepreneurs. They don't have easier lives. They don't wake up with magical motivation. They've simply conditioned their brain to follow their decisions instead of their feelings. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't wait for inspiration. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They act, and that is the muscle we are going to build today. Your brain responds to standards, not wishes. Most people have wishes. I want to lose weight. I want to make money. I want to improve my life. Wishes don't move your life. Standards do. When something becomes a must instead of a should, your brain changes. When you say, I don't skip workouts, your brain adjusts. When you say, I don't break promises to myself, you grow power. When you say, I finish what I start, your identity shifts. Your brain follows firm decisions, not soft hopes. The power of controlled discomfort. Growth only happens in discomfort. Confidence only happens from doing the hard thing. Read that again. If you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. If you avoid growth, you avoid confidence. And without confidence, your entire life becomes smaller. So ask yourself, what is one hard thing I have been avoiding? Maybe it's starting a project. Maybe it's ending a toxic habit. Maybe it's taking responsibility. Maybe it's demanding more from yourself. Maybe it's choosing discipline over distraction. Your future depends on your answer. The 3-second rule of breaking mental resistance. Let me give you a tool right now. Simple, powerful, and life-changing. When your brain tries to pull you away from something you know you must do, count 3, 2, 1, go. Move before the hesitation grows roots. Action before fear. Movement before overthinking. Your brain cannot stop a body in motion. The moment you move, you win. The resistance weakens. The identity strengthens. The pattern rewires. You're building a new mind, a mind that supports your greatness instead of sabotaging it. Your future self is watching you. There is a version of you, stronger, more confident, more powerful, who is watching every single decision you make today. Every time you choose comfort, that future version becomes a little more distant. Every time you choose the hard thing, that future version steps closer. Think about that. Every choice is a vote for the person you want to become. Are you voting for your limits, or are you voting for your potential? The price of a great life. Let me be honest with you. Greatness comes with a price. The price is discipline. The price is consistency. The price is showing up even when it's uncomfortable. But here's the secret. Suffering and discipline is temporary. Suffering and regret is permanent. You will pay either way, but one payment transforms your life and the other destroys it. So choose the pain that builds you, not the pain that breaks you. You must become the commander, not the slave. Your brain is an incredible tool when you lead it, and a terrible master when you obey it. You were not born to be controlled by procrastination. You were not born to be controlled by fear. You were not born to be controlled by excuses. You were born with the ability to choose action, to choose power, to choose progress. And once you claim that ability, once you force your brain to do the hard thing, every area of your life improves. Your relationships, your work, your confidence, your health, your happiness, your purpose. Everything rises. This is your moment. Right now, this very moment, you have a choice. You can keep letting your brain run the show, or you can take control. You can keep repeating the same cycle, or you can break it. You can keep waiting for motivation, or you can create momentum. So here is my challenge to you. Pick one hard thing and do it today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Force your brain to follow your decision. Show it who is in charge. Build the muscle of unstoppable discipline, because the person who can do hard things consistently becomes the person who can do anything. Final truth. Your brain is powerful, but you are more powerful. Your excuses are loud, but your purpose is louder. Your fears feel real, but your dreams are more real. You have greatness inside you, and it awakens the moment you force your brain to rise with you. So decide today, no more negotiating, no more waiting, no more shrinking, no more comfort controlling your destiny. From today forward, you do the hard things. You choose the higher path. You become unstoppable. This is your turning point. This is your moment. This is where your new life begins. Now go and force your brain to follow your destiny. Your brain is wired for comfort, not success. And once you understand the power of that truth, everything about how you operate begins to change. Most people walk through life believing that their lack of action comes from laziness, lack of motivation, or some personal flaw inside them. But the real reason sits much deeper and much older. Your brain was built by evolution to protect you, to keep you alive, to keep you away from anything uncertain, uncomfortable, risky, or challenging. And from an evolutionary perspective, that programming made perfect sense. Thousands of years ago, discomfort usually meant danger. Pushing into the unknown meant predators, injury, starvation, or death. So the brain developed a survival mechanism. Avoid anything unfamiliar, anything that feels painful, anything that requires more energy than necessary. That instinct lives inside you today, even though the world around you has changed. Now, discomfort no longer means danger. Waking up early won't kill you. Starting a business won't kill you. Learning a new skill won't kill you. Speaking up, taking responsibility, pushing your limits, none of these things threaten your life. Yet your brain reacts to them with the same ancient fear response. It whispers that it's too hard, too risky, too tiring, too overwhelming. It pushes you toward the couch instead of the workout, toward scrolling instead of studying, toward comfort instead of growth. Every time you choose the easier path, your brain rewards you with a small hit of relief, and that relief becomes addictive. But every time you choose the harder path, the part of your brain that fears effort starts firing alarms, trying to pull you back to safety. And that tension is what most people interpret as a sign that they shouldn't continue. They mistake discomfort for a stop sign, when in reality, it's a signal that they're moving into a territory where growth actually occurs. Understanding that your brain is wired this way is liberating because it removes the shame from struggle. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling resistance. There's nothing wrong with you for wanting comfort. It's literally how the human brain is constructed. The issue only becomes a problem when you allow that programming to dominate your decisions. The brain wants to conserve energy, avoid stress, and repeat predictable patterns because predictable patterns keep you alive. But predictable patterns also keep you average. Predictable patterns keep you repeating the same year of your life over and over again. Predictable patterns keep you stuck while your potential remains dormant. The brain's love for comfort is so strong that it even distorts your perception. It magnifies the difficulty of the task you need to do. It exaggerates the pain. It floods your mind with what-ifs. It convinces you that right now isn't the right time, that you'll feel more motivated later, that waiting is safer. But motivation is not coming. Motivation is a reward, not a starting point. Action comes first. Motivation comes after. The people who achieve extraordinary things are not the ones with special gifts. They're simply the ones who stop expecting comfort to guide them. They recognize that the brain will always push toward what's easy, but they train themselves to push back harder. Once you see that your brain's default is comfort, you also begin to see how many areas of your life are controlled by unconscious patterns. Your habits, your routines, your emotional reactions. So much of your behavior is automated. The brain loves automation because it saves energy. If you repeatedly avoid hard things, the brain locks that pattern in. If you repeatedly procrastinate, the brain makes that your default. If you repeatedly back down when something feels difficult, the brain rewires itself to expect avoidance every time discomfort appears. The longer you obey this pattern, the more powerful it becomes. Comfort becomes not just a preference, but an identity. The good news is that the opposite is also true. When you repeatedly push into discomfort, when you choose effort over ease, when you force your brain to engage in hard things despite its resistance, the brain adapts. It begins creating new associations. Challenge becomes familiar. Effort becomes normal. Discomfort becomes manageable. You build mental strength the same way you build physical strength, through stress that doesn't break you but teaches your system to grow. The first time you do something hard, your brain may scream. The 5th time, it may whisper. The 50th time, it may stay silent. What once triggered fear becomes routine, and what once felt impossible becomes your new baseline. Your brain isn't wired for success, because success requires repeated discomfort, repeated uncertainty, repeated effort, and repeated risk. Success requires you to override automatic signals that try to pull you backward. But once you start repeatedly overriding those signals, something powerful happens. The structure of your identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids hard things. You stop believing the voice that says you're tired or unprepared or incapable. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who acts despite doubt, someone who chooses discipline over impulse. That shift is the foundation of transformation. When your identity changes, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your life changes. Your brain will always try to return to comfort, but you don't have to. Growth is a conscious choice. Effort is a conscious choice. Action is a conscious choice. The brain may resist, but resistance is not a command. It's a suggestion. You can acknowledge it without obeying it. You can feel discomfort without retreating from it. You can hear the fear without letting it dictate your direction. And every time you make that choice, you weaken the old patterns and strengthen the new ones. You stop living as a prisoner of your biology and begin living as the architect of your mind. The people who build extraordinary lives don't have easier brains. They don't wake up feeling motivated every day. Their brains try to protect them the same way yours does. The difference is that they have trained themselves to act independently of that comfort instinct. They have practiced disciplining their thoughts, directing their focus, and conditioning their responses. They have built mental muscles strong enough to carry them through the moments when the brain begs them to stop. They understand that comfort is temporary, but the rewards of doing what's hard last a lifetime. When you fully accept that your brain will always try to steer you toward the easy path, you stop waiting for life to get easier. You stop hoping you'll someday wake up with unlimited motivation. You stop believing the lie that successful people are simply born different. You begin to realize that the only real separation between an average life and an extraordinary one is the ability to act in spite of mental resistance. Your brain may be wired for comfort, but you are not limited by that wiring. You have the power to train it, redirect it, and use it as a tool instead of an obstacle. Win the first 5 seconds of resistance, because those 5 seconds determine the direction of your entire day, your habits, your decisions, and ultimately your life. Every time you face something difficult, waking up early, starting a workout, making that phone call, sitting down to study, beginning a challenging project, there is a brief moment where your brain tries to pull you back into safety. It's that tiny pause, that hesitation, that whisper of resistance. And most people lose their entire potential inside that small window. They don't fail because the task is too hard. They fail because they surrender to the first 5 seconds of discomfort. Your brain is programmed to protect you, not to push you. It scans for anything that requires effort, energy, risk, or uncertainty. And the moment it senses that you are about to step into something uncomfortable, it fires off signals designed to stop you. It tells you to do it later. It tells you it's not the right time. It tells you you're tired. It tells you you'll start tomorrow. And the tragic part is that most people don't even recognize this pattern. They think the hesitation means something is wrong. They think it means they're not ready, but that hesitation is nothing more than a built-in survival reflex that hasn't evolved as fast as your goals have. When you understand this, you stop taking that resistance personally. You stop letting it dictate your choices. You stop waiting for a magical burst of motivation that will never come. Instead, you learn to beat the resistance by acting before it grows. Momentum is fragile in the beginning. It exists only for a moment before the brain tries to crush it. If you don't move within those first 5 seconds, your mind starts negotiating. And once negotiation begins, action declines. You know this from experience. You've had mornings when you set an alarm and plan to get up early. The alarm rings, you hesitate for just a few seconds, and suddenly your brain floods you with reasons to stay in bed. The entire plan dissolves because of a tiny pause. That is the power of those 5 seconds. They shape what happens next. They decide whether your day becomes productive or wasted, whether your goals move forward or stay stuck, whether you strengthen your discipline or weaken it. The secret is to move before the resistance has time to solidify. Action interrupts hesitation. Motion overrides fear. The brain can't argue with a body that's already moving. That's why athletes say the hardest part of training is showing up. Once they're on the field, the resistance quiets. Once you take the first step, the brain recalibrates. It stops panicking and starts cooperating, but you have to beat it quickly. Those 5 seconds are a psychological doorway, and once they close, your opportunity to act shrinks dramatically. If you let hesitation expand, it becomes overthinking. If you let overthinking expand, it becomes fear. If you let fear expand, it becomes paralysis. All because you didn't move during the initial moment when the brain was most vulnerable. Winning those 5 seconds is a skill. It's a muscle. It's a discipline you build through repetition. The more you respond immediately, the stronger the pattern becomes. You begin to condition your brain to associate action with decision, not action with comfort. You train yourself to move before the mind interferes. You stop giving your brain the time it needs to sabotage you, and after enough repetitions, you stop fearing the resistance altogether. You expect it. You know it's coming. But you also know that it has no power if you don't give it any. The first 5 seconds are also where identity is shaped. Every time you act immediately, you cast a vote for a stronger version of yourself. You tell your mind, I do what needs to be done, not what feels easy. You reinforce self-trust. You deepen confidence. You rewrite the internal narrative that once said you procrastinate, avoid challenges, or wait for motivation. Each instant reaction becomes evidence that you are disciplined, capable, and in control. But every time you hesitate and comply with resistance, you reinforce the opposite identity. You teach yourself that discomfort wins. You teach your brain that excuses are stronger than intention. You build a habit of surrendering before you even begin. And once that identity forms, it becomes harder to break. That's why the 5 seconds matter so much. They are the birthplace of your behavior and the birthplace of your future self. Most people underestimate how fast the mind can shift from willingness to resistance. In a matter of seconds, the brain can go from I should do this to I'll do it tomorrow without any logical reason. It does this because the brain hates unpredictability. Starting anything new, difficult, or effort-heavy creates a spike in psychological discomfort, and that discomfort is interpreted as danger, even though there is no actual threat. If you wait too long, the discomfort grows stronger. But if you act immediately, you bypass the entire fear response. Action kills doubt faster than doubt can kill action. Winning those 5 seconds transforms the way you handle discipline. Instead of trying to motivate yourself, you rely on execution. Instead of trying to negotiate with your emotions, you override them. Instead of trying to feel ready, you let action create readiness. The truth is, most people wait for the perfect emotional state before starting something hard, but that emotional state rarely arrives on its own. Action generates the emotion you need, not the other way around. When you move first, motivation follows. When you hesitate first, resistance follows. 5 seconds decide the direction. The more you apply this principle, the more automatic it becomes. You begin to get up when the alarm rings without thinking. You begin to start your work without scrolling for distractions. You begin to say yes to opportunities without letting fear poison the moment. You begin to take control of your mind instead of being controlled by it. Resistance may still show up, but you no longer freeze when it does. You respond with action, not thought. Winning the first 5 seconds is about understanding that hesitation is the enemy of progress. It's about realizing that your potential is often blocked not by difficulty, but by delay. It's about recognizing that the person who moves quickly builds confidence quickly. And it's about mastering the space between intention and action. Because that space determines whether your dreams grow or die. Raise your standards from should to must. Because nothing changes in your life until the things you say you want become non-negotiable. Most people live in the world of should. They say they should work out, they should save money, they should start the business, they should stop procrastinating, they should change their habits, they should improve their life. But should has no power. Should is soft. Should is optional. Should allows excuses, delays, and negotiations. When something stays a should, your brain never commits the energy, focus, or discipline needed to make it real. And deep down, you know that. You know every time you've said you should do something and then didn't do it. You know the feeling of setting goals that never become actions. You know the frustration of planning your life more than you actually live it. That frustration comes from standards that are too low, too flexible, too dependent on how you feel in the moment. The truth is, your life reflects not what you want, but what you tolerate. You don't get your goals, you get your standards. You get the level of behavior you consistently accept from yourself. If your standard is to work only when motivated, then you will always struggle with inconsistency. If your standard is to avoid discomfort, then you will always fall short of your potential. If your standard is to make excuses, you will always find a reason not to take action. But when something becomes a must, everything shifts. A must rewires your identity. A must forces you to act regardless of emotion. A must overrides fear, doubt, and hesitation. A must creates pressure, not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that wakes up your power. Think about the times in your life when you absolutely had to do something, when there was no other option, no backup plan, no opportunity to procrastinate. You didn't need motivation, you simply acted. You didn't wait for inspiration, you handled it. You didn't think, you executed. Pressure created clarity. Clarity created urgency. Urgency created action. And that action created results. The moment something becomes a must, your brain stops debating and starts solving. It redirects energy toward finding a way instead of finding an excuse. It expands your creativity, your courage, and your determination. Your standards become the thermostat of your life. No matter what happens, you always return to the level of your standards. If your standard is high performance, you rise to it. If your standard is settling, you fall into it. And the scary part is that most people never examine their standards. They assume their behavior is random, but it's not. It's patterned. It's predictable. It's aligned with the identity they've built around what they consider acceptable. Raising your standards means raising your identity. You can't expect world-class results with average expectations for yourself. You can't expect discipline with a casual relationship to your goals. You can't expect transformation while clinging to comfort. Every breakthrough in your life will come from raising what you demand from yourself. Not what you hope for, not what you prefer, what you demand. Standards create the foundation. Habits build the structure. Identity fills the home you eventually live in. When you shift something from I should to I must, you stop allowing your feelings to control your behavior. You stop letting the brain negotiate your potential away. You stop breaking promises to yourself. Instead of trying to do your best, you do what is required. There's a huge difference between wanting something and being committed to it. Wanting is emotional. Commitment is structural. Wanting can disappear when you're tired. Commitment remains even when you're exhausted. Wanting can collapse when things get difficult. Commitment becomes stronger when things get difficult. People fail not because their goals are too big, but because their standards are too small. They want massive change without holding themselves to a level of discipline that matches the outcome they seek. They want greatness while living in comfort. They want growth while protecting old habits. But standards and results are always connected. High standards create high results. Low standards create low results. If you want a higher quality of life, you must demand a higher quality of action from yourself. Raising your standards is not about becoming harsh with yourself. It's about becoming honest with yourself. It's about recognizing the gap between who you are and who you want to be and taking responsibility for closing that gap. It means deciding what is no longer acceptable: procrastination, excuses, inconsistency, fear-driven decisions, broken promises, and weak commitments. It means setting new rules for yourself, rules that align with the life you want, not the life you're trying to escape. When you raise your standards, you eliminate confusion, you eliminate negotiation, you eliminate the constant internal conflict between desire and behavior. Instead of asking, do I feel like it? You ask, is this aligned with who I am becoming? When something becomes a must, your behavior becomes automatic. You don't think about brushing your teeth, you do it because it's a standard. You don't think about showing up to work, you do it because it's a standard. Imagine if discipline became a standard. Imagine if growth became a standard. Imagine if pushing yourself became a standard. Imagine if finishing what you start became a standard. You wouldn't need motivation. You wouldn't need reminders. You wouldn't need accountability. Your standards would carry you. The highest performing people in every field aren't relying on willpower. They've simply raised their standards far above the average person. They don't allow themselves to operate below a certain level. They don't accept excuses. They don't tolerate mediocrity. They don't bend their goals around their moods. They bend their moods around their goals. They treat high performance as a lifestyle, not an event. And that begins with standards. Raising your standards also changes the way you respond to obstacles. When your level of demand on yourself is high, you don't stop when things get hard. You adapt, you adjust, you recalibrate, you find another way. Failure becomes information, not identity. Resistance becomes training, not a barrier. Discomfort becomes a signal of growth, not a sign to turn back. You stop avoiding hard things and start seeking the challenge that expands you. Because a high standard doesn't crumble under pressure, it thrives under pressure. You can tell a lot about someone's standards by looking at their smallest habits. The way they show up, the way they speak to themselves, the way they handle setbacks, the way they treat their commitments, the way they handle the little things, because the little things become the big things. A person with high standards doesn't wait for the right moment. They create it. They don't hope their life improves. They upgrade themselves first. They don't rely on circumstances. They rely on consistency. Raising your standards means deciding who you refuse to be anymore and who you demand yourself to become. Action rewires your identity, not motivation. Because who you become is shaped by what you repeatedly do, not by what you repeatedly feel. People wait their entire lives for motivation, assuming that inspiration is the spark required for change, but that belief traps them in the same cycles year after year. Motivation is unpredictable. Motivation is inconsistent. Motivation is emotional. It rises when life feels exciting and collapses the moment discomfort appears. If you rely on motivation to change your life, you will change nothing because motivation fluctuates too often to build anything meaningful. Action, on the other hand, creates internal evidence. Every action you take becomes a vote for the type of person you believe you are. Every time you take action despite resistance, you strengthen the part of you that believes you are capable, disciplined, committed, and strong. And every time you hesitate, postpone, or give in to comfort, you reinforce the identity that says you avoid hard things, you break promises, and you lack discipline. Identity is not a personality trait. Identity is a pattern of repeated behaviors. And action is the only force powerful enough to rewrite those patterns. Think about every meaningful achievement in your life. It wasn't motivation that carried you through the difficult days. It wasn't inspiration that kept you moving forward when you felt tired, overwhelmed, or discouraged. It was action. Small steps, repeated steps, steps taken even when you didn't want to take them. Action builds momentum. Momentum builds belief. Belief builds identity. And identity builds destiny. But too many people make the mistake of trying to think their way into a new identity. They read motivational quotes, watch inspiring videos, imagine their goals, visualize change, and yet take minimal action. They're trying to create a mental shift without a behavioral shift, and that simply doesn't work. The brain doesn't rewire itself through imagination alone. It rewires itself through experience. The circuits in your brain fire when you act, not when you think about acting. The emotional patterns in your mind change when your behavior changes. If you wait to feel confident before taking action, you will wait forever because confidence is a result, not a prerequisite. Confidence is built from doing the thing you're afraid of, not from thinking about doing it. Action is the bridge between intention and identity. Every time you push through resistance, you weaken the power of your old identity. You weaken the voice that says you're inconsistent. You weaken the pattern that keeps you stuck. You weaken the part of you that believes you can't change. At the same time, you strengthen the identity of the person you're becoming. You create proof that you're someone who shows up. You create proof that you can do hard things. You create proof that discipline is possible for you. Proof is far more powerful than motivation. Proof transforms how you see yourself. A single action taken in discomfort has more impact on your identity than 100 moments of inspiration. That's why small actions matter so much. People underestimate the power of one push-up, one paragraph written, one page read, 1 minute of effort. They dismiss small actions because they feel insignificant, but small actions accumulate. Small actions compound. Small actions become habits, and habits become identity. A small action repeated consistently becomes a force strong enough to rewrite your entire life. Your brain loves consistency. When you act consistently, your brain begins to shift its expectations. It starts seeing your behavior as normal instead of unusual. It stops fighting you and starts assisting you. The resistance weakens because your brain adapts to whatever you repeat. If you repeatedly procrastinate, the brain wires that pattern in. If you repeatedly take action quickly, the brain wires that pattern in too. Whatever you repeat becomes who you are. That is why action is so powerful. It doesn't just move you toward your goals. It reshapes the structure of your thinking. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. You stop identifying as someone who wants to be better and start identifying as someone who actually follows through. Action transforms your internal narrative. It changes the story you tell yourself when no one is watching. Motivation often creates emotional spikes. Those spikes feel good, but they don't last. After an inspiring moment, you still face the same resistance, the same fear, the same habits. But when you turn action into your default response, you no longer need to rely on emotional spikes. You operate from discipline instead of mood. You operate from identity instead of impulse. The real shift happens when action becomes automatic. At that point, you don't wake up wondering if you'll work on your goals. You simply do. You don't debate whether you should be productive. You follow the identity you've built. You don't negotiate with excuses because your actions have trained your mind to push through them. This is the power of behavioral momentum. Once you create momentum through consistent action, it becomes easier to maintain than to break. Another reason action rewires identity is because action exposes you to feedback. When you act, you learn. You see what works and what doesn't. You adapt. Growth requires feedback, and feedback only comes through doing. Motivation without action is imagination. Action without motivation is transformation. Action teaches you that you can handle more than you think. Action proves that fear is not fatal. Action reveals that discomfort fades. Action shows you that most limits are mental, not physical. When you start seeing results from your behavior, even small results, you reinforce a new self-image. You start believing that your effort matters. You start believing that you are capable of change. You start believing that you can influence your life instead of being controlled by patterns. Belief built on action is unshakable because it is grounded in evidence. Belief built on motivation is fragile because it is grounded in emotion. Many people think they need to feel different before acting differently. But the truth is, you must act differently before you will ever feel different. If you wait for the perfect emotional state, you delay your transformation indefinitely. The emotion comes after the action. Courage comes after action. Confidence comes after action. Discipline comes after action. Identity comes after action. That is the order. You move first, then your mind follows. Every time you interrupt old patterns with new behavior, you are carving a new pathway in your brain. Over time, that pathway becomes stronger, faster, easier. Eventually, the new identity becomes natural, almost effortless, because the brain now recognizes it as the default. That is how action rewires identity. Not in one big leap, but in thousands of tiny choices that send the same message again and again. This is who I am now. Doing one hard thing every day is not just a productivity tactic. It's a form of self-training that reshapes the way you see yourself and the way your mind responds to challenge. When you intentionally choose something difficult and push through it, you're teaching your brain that struggle is not danger, it's growth. Most people wait for confidence, wait for motivation, wait for the perfect moment to begin something hard. But the truth is, the people who seem the most confident are simply the ones who have conditioned themselves to step into difficulty repeatedly until discomfort feels normal. Confidence isn't a personality trait, it's a byproduct of accumulated victories. And those victories come from choosing the hard path instead of the easy one on a consistent basis. One hard thing a day builds a kind of internal momentum that can't be bought, copied, or faked. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. It loves routine, familiarity, and the path of least resistance. That's why you feel that initial hesitation every time you face something challenging. It's your biology trying to keep you safe. But when you introduce daily hard tasks, whether it's waking up early, taking a cold shower, finishing something you've been avoiding, speaking up when it's uncomfortable, or pushing through an extra mile at the gym, you're training your brain to stay calm in the presence of resistance. You're proving to yourself over and over that you can handle more than your impulses want you to believe. Over time, the task itself becomes less important than the identity you're building, a person who leans into challenges instead of backing away. When you do one hard thing a day, you eliminate the myth that you need to feel ready. You learn that readiness is a feeling that follows action, not something that appears before it. You start recognizing that the hardest part is rarely the task itself. It's the emotional friction before you begin. By engaging with this friction daily, your tolerance for discomfort skyrockets. That means when life throws something bigger, something unexpected, something that would normally intimidate you, you face it with a baseline of mental toughness most people never develop. You've practiced being uncomfortable. You've practiced staying steady under pressure. You've practiced overriding your excuses with action. That practice becomes a skill, and that skill becomes your edge. Doing one hard thing a day also rewires your relationship with fear. Fear shrinks when you take action in its presence. It gets louder when you retreat. Every hard task you complete is like putting another brick in the foundation of courage. It doesn't matter if the task is small or large. What matters is that you intentionally chose the harder option. That choice creates self-respect. Self-respect creates certainty. And certainty creates the quiet, unshakable belief that you can handle life on your own terms. Most people hope for that belief. Few people earn it. You earn it one hard thing at a time. There is also power in breaking the illusion that your mind controls you. When you challenge yourself daily, you flip the balance. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You begin to feel the difference between your mind's suggestions and your own decisions. When your brain says stop, you learn to hear it without obeying it. When it says take it easy, you learn to evaluate instead of surrendering. Your daily hard task becomes a training ground where you're teaching your mind who is in charge. That sense of control leaks into every other area of your life. Your work, your relationships, your goals. It's not about becoming robotic or emotionless. It's about developing mastery over the part of you that wants to stay small. What makes this daily practice so transformative is how quickly it compounds. One hard thing today seems insignificant. 10 days of consistent challenge, that's a shift. 30 days, that's identity change beginning. 90 days, that's a completely different level of internal power. You start seeing patterns. The more you push yourself, the more capable you feel. The more capable you feel, the more bold actions you take. The more bold actions you take, the more your life changes. People talk about wanting a breakthrough, a moment that transforms everything. But breakthroughs aren't random. They're built through repeated acts of courage. They're built through your willingness to do what others avoid. And when you do one hard thing every single day, you're creating the conditions for breakthroughs to happen instead of waiting for them. Choosing one hard thing a day also destroys the illusion that growth must be dramatic or life-changing to matter. The truth is, small daily challenges build more strength and discipline than occasional bursts of massive effort. It's the same way you'd train a muscle. Repetitive, controlled stress over time leads to strength. One hard thing a day is that stress for your mind. And just like physical training, you'll notice changes you didn't expect. You hesitate less. You recover faster. You adapt quicker. You don't panic as easily. You begin to operate with an underlying confidence that makes you stand out because you're no longer ruled by the feeling of, I don't want to. You act based on who you're becoming, not how you feel in the moment. There will be days when you don't want to do anything hard. Days when life feels heavy, when motivation is non-existent, when your mind is whispering every excuse. But those are the days that count the most. Doing something hard when you feel strong is useful. Doing something hard when you feel weak is transformational. That's the moment when you're breaking old patterns. That's when you're proving to yourself that your commitment is stronger than your mood. And that kind of proof changes the way you see yourself permanently. Once you learn that you can act in spite of resistance, resistance loses its power over you. This practice doesn't require perfection. It requires intention. The hard thing doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to require effort, focus, or courage. It has to challenge you in some way. Over time, your brain stops freaking out at discomfort because it knows you face it daily. You've normalized struggle. You've normalized effort. You've normalized choosing the path with resistance. Most people avoid resistance at all costs. You're training yourself to walk right toward it. A single habit separates you from average thinking, average effort, and average results. When you consistently choose challenge, challenge stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like an opportunity to grow stronger. And as you build this routine, you'll notice something powerful. The hard things you choose today become the easy things tomorrow. What used to make you anxious becomes simple. What used to hold you back becomes part of your skill set. You upgrade your baseline, and because you're doing it every day, the upgrade never stops. That's how mental dominance is built. Not through a single act of bravery, but through repeated acts of intentional difficulty, stacked day after day until your mind realizes that you are not someone who steps back. You are someone who steps forward every single time.